May PCCEP meeting started. I want to welcome you all to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. Because this is an online format and this is our second online meeting, folks might not always be aware of who we are. If we can just go around, if you're a PCCEP member, and just introduce yourself, your name and any subcommittee that you sit on or chair, that would be great. And we'll just start. We'll start with whoever. We'll start with Andrew.
I'm Andrew Kallick. I'm a co-chair, and I lead the Settlement Agreement and Policy Subcommittee.
Taji.
I'm Taji Chestnut. I am on the Youth Subcommittee.
Elliot.
Elliot Young. I'm alternate co-chair on the steering committee, and I'm also part of the Race and Equity Committee.
Marcia.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marcia Perez. I'm the chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee.
Vadim.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vadim, secretary, as well as on the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee, as well as the Behavioral Health Subcommittee.
Thank you. Britt.
Hi, everyone. Britt Masbach, and I am a co-chair with the Youth Subcommittee.
Andre.
Andre LaRoche, and I sit on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee.
Thank you. Ann.
Hi, Ann Campbell, and I sit on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee.
Amy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Amy Anderson, and I am the chair of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. Welcome, everybody.
Jamari, I don't see you, but I just talked to him a moment ago. Jamari, are you on here? She's not on here yet. Okay. Okay. Did I miss anybody? I think I got everyone on here. Okay. I just wanted to open this meeting with an acknowledgement of a lot of current events that are going on around our world, especially in regards to Black people being harassed and killed in all parts of our country. And two names in particular that stand out to me tonight are Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. One was killed while out jogging, and the other was killed just in the last couple of days in Minneapolis in police custody. And just want to reaffirm PCCEP's commitment to really building trust and being bridge builders between all members of the community and the Portland Police Bureau, and really recognizing just what is at stake as we go out and do our work, that there are people that seemingly mundane things turn into tragic events. And we recognize here in PCCEP that in order for that to change, we need a system, a cultural change in the way that policing is done and in the way that our community responds, particularly in response to Black lives, but in lives of other people who oftentimes go unheard in our community. So I'd just like to open with a moment of silence for both of those two individuals, and unfortunately other individuals that will be killed, because this will happen again until we are truly ready to deal with the reality of the country we live in. So if everybody could just take a brief moment of silence. Thank you. We are going to get into our subcommittee reports. I ask that folks be brief with these just because we do have a lot to go through today. So I'll just go through our co-chair or chairs or co-chairs of each subcommittee and get the reports. Why don't we start with Amy and the Behavioral Health Subcommittee? Oh, you're on mute, Amy.
Okay. Hello again. We'll start over. We had a great meeting on the May 5th. And in the Behavioral Health Committee, we discussed some issues with the COCO report. And we also discussed changing the section in the recommendation form under where it said it says mental illness. And we wanted to say behavioral health, which includes substance use and mental illness. So I'm asking the full committee to probably take a vote on this because we want to get it upgraded throughout PCCEP so that it reads better and it sounds better. We also listened to Sean Campbell go over the Training Advisory Council, gave us a review of what they were doing, and let's see, TAC has been working on a variety of recommendations for PBB, how to better their training. And then next steps are going to be to review the Portland Police Bureau strategic plan. And I've got some other recommendations that I would like to bring forth administratively in our paperwork. So what is the best way you want me to do that? There's some things I would like to see changed on how we do business. And typically those things are done in executive committee, but we don't have one. And we
do
need
the steering
in the
committee.
steering committee.
Say it again. The steering committee is the executive committee. Why don't we bring it up there?
Typically, we don't have time for that. Can I make an agenda piece for us to have time as a steering committee?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I would like to ask that tonight, if y'all would indulge me.
Yes, you're asking for it to be placed on the next steering committee meeting.
Yes, so I can talk about some updates to our process paperwork.
Yep. I'm seeing a nod from Andrew as well. Yeah, that works. And if you could just email
great.
that, can make sure to get that on the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay,
So
appreciate it.
Our future meeting coming up is going to be an educational time with Casey, Lieutenant Casey from BHU, so we can all learn more about it. So we can think.
Oh, can you just be sure to, and this goes for everybody else, just be sure to spell out what the acronyms are for people who don't know them.
We're going to get education on the behavioral health unit, and we're going to learn about what they do first, and then we'll move our way into talking about the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee afterwards. But the behavioral health unit is the one that actually answers the calls. So we need to get some education around how they work, what the referral process is, and a little more about how they function with the clients.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the youth subcommittee.
Okay, I'll start, and then Britt has some points to add as well. So from our previous meeting, am I lagging? From our previous meeting, we talked about our initial policy recommendation process that we're working on with Word is Bond and Multnomah Youth Commission. We've been continuing doing that, and we had our monthly May meeting along with a work session, or 2 work sessions with MYC and Word is Bond, and we've now established a research process we're doing on a policy recommendation on restorative justice, and we'll actually be finalizing a draft of that by tomorrow, and interviewing an individual from juvenile justice to also have some interesting insight on the youth service division specifically. And then Britt has a little more to say about the community engagement side.
Yeah. So also something that we have been wanting to work on for a while is community engagement, how to get more young people to the table generally, but like also during this process when we're working on something like a policy recommendation. So we put together like a pretty robust list of all the organizations locally that we thought had some stake in, well, some leadership of or involvement of youth. And then we're going to be reaching out to them to get contacts with some of their youth leaders or youth members, and then trying to, in the immediate future, like get some insight on and interview them for this restorative justice policy recommendation Taji was talking about. And then in the long term, trying to get some more applications going into the summer and fall for the PCCEP, and then also like just to be at our meetings, at the youth subcommittee meetings. So that's the other thing.
Thank you. Let's turn it over to Andrew for the policy and settlement subcommittee.
Sure. So quick agenda this month. Our main agenda item was talking with the Bureau and with the members who are present about the Bureau's effort at revising the STOPS data collection form. We had a good discussion of that. We talked about a number of different cities and how they collect that information. And we'll be providing some draft recommendations for the Bureau by the June meeting for the full board. So we'll discuss them again at the Settlement Agreement and Policy Subcommittee next month with the hope of getting them on the full board agenda for the end of June meeting. That's Settlement Agreement and Policy.
Appreciate it. Turn it over to Marcia with the Racial Equity Subcommittee.
Hey everyone, we met last Thursday on May 21st. We heard from the community just to give some updates and had a really rich discussion. It was probably one of our most attended meetings in a while. We were able to hear from folks from Civic Life and Community Safety, previously known as crime prevention. So we learned about kind of the efforts that they're doing in the community and how they're moving to a more holistic approach to safety. We also heard from Marlon Marion with Portland Police to learn about their community engagement efforts and how they align with what our subcommittees moving forward to. There is a recommendation actually posted in error on our website, and I've asked that if we can get that removed. We have not completed that, and so if Thea or Claudia can remove that, that would be awesome. We want to continue to engage various other community organizations. We were able to meet within the last month with the AMAC, like I said, Civic Life, PUA, the Portland United Against Hate. I'll be meeting with them again this week. And so we're continuing to engage different communities to build power in voices that are not being heard in the community. So if you have suggestions, please send my way. The next meeting is going to be on June 18th at 5:30.
Thank you, Marcia. And I'll wrap up with the steering committee and have Andrew jump in with anything that he might want to add. We reviewed last month's, which was our first Zoom meeting, and just kind of worked through the kinks and what went well and what didn't. Talked a little bit about the status hearing from the groups that presented at the court hearing, and actually have another update on that when we get to the community outreach piece of the agenda. Got some updates on the behavioral health subcommittee, which is kind of in a revamping process right now, and just a lot of the work that they're doing. And Amy and the rest of the team have done a really great job on that, so that's really good to hear. And then we spent a bulk of the time talking about data and what we're looking to do with that. And one of the things that kind of came out of it was creating almost like an ad hoc or subcommittee within a committee to specifically look at data and really realizing that the intersection that it plays in all of our work. And so making sure that there is space within there to really request data, spread it out to the different subcommittees, and kind of keep that connection with PPB going in regards to that. And so that's kind of how tonight's discussion on use of force data kind of came about, was using this as a jumping point to kind of take a deeper dive into that. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add from that meeting?
No, nothing else to add.
Okay, great. And then I'm going to turn it over to you for to the next part. I think it's COVID.
Yeah, great. So this next section is an update from the Bureau on patrol during COVID. We've talked about this in the past, and I'd welcome Assistant Chief Frome to chime in on this if you're on. I see you there, so thank you for joining us.
Hi there, thank you, Andrew. I know I haven't met a lot of you. I'm Mike Frome. I am the Assistant Chief for Operations Branch, so I oversee patrol and traffic. Andrew, is there anything specific that you're looking for, or just a high altitude view?
A high altitude view is great. The sort of specific questions that have come in past meetings are the extent to which the Bureau has policed the stay-at-home order. Today would be sort of social distancing requirements. And also there was interest in a number of subcommittee meetings this month about the reporting about what's happening in Old Town. So if you could talk about those two things specifically, that'd be great, but otherwise a broad view would be welcomed.
Sure. Why don't I talk first about policing the stay-at-home order or social distancing guidelines. From the beginning, the governor made it fairly clear, the mayor made it clear, and I think our chief of police made it clear that the role of the police in anything to do with social distancing or enforcing a stay-at-home order was to provide education and use any type of enforcement as a last resort. And that's primarily where we've been. To my knowledge, we haven't arrested or charged anybody with a violation of the governor's order. Walking around my neighborhood, I see people violating it all the time, and I don't see a whole lot of police swooping in to try to correct them. We got calls to 911, especially at the outset, but I believe that has tapered off over time. So at this point, our role has been very minimal, at least as far as that goes. We saw a drop in a lot of reported crimes when the stay-at-home order first went into effect. It has been slowly creeping back. Some crime categories are much higher this time of year than they were a year ago. Commercial burglaries are up almost like 28% in the Central Precinct area, for example. Vandalism is also up. Person crimes remains fairly steady from about a year ago, but it had a slight dip, and then we started seeing an increase again. That's kind of it from a big overview on that. Does anyone have any specific questions before I move into talking about Old Town policing efforts?
Any questions from PCCEP, and then we'll open it more broadly.
Yeah, I had a question. I had understood that the general policy of the Portland Police was not to do sweeps of homeless encampments during this crisis, although I read a news report about at least one camp being swept. So is that true that there's a general policy of not sweeping, and in cases where there are sweeps, what does that do to?
Well, I think the first thing I'll have to talk about is that there's two ways that a campsite would get addressed. The first one is through the Homeless Urban Camping Impact Reduction Program, which you'll hear us call HUCIRP, H-U-C-I-R-P. And that is a program that is run outside of the Portland Police Bureau. They maintain the one point of contact where people can call and make complaints about camping locations. And then they have basically a math formula to determine when campsites reach a point that they feel that they need to have cleanup work done. Now, during this crisis, HUCIRP has not been doing the cleanup process because they were following some CDC, Centers for Disease Control guidelines that said, do not disrupt the campsites. On a separate track, the Portland Police Bureau has the ability to perform what we refer to as an emergency abatement, meaning when we find a campsite that we link with specific crimes, severe sanitation problems, and just general unsafe conditions, we can then write reports and request for cleanup services through the HUCIRP process. And that is what you started to see in some locations in Central Precinct, is that over several months, some camping locations simply became, in the Police Bureau's opinion, too unsafe to allow to continue at the rate that they were evolving.
Thank you.
Any other PCCEP comments for the Assistant Chief before turning it open? Anne, go ahead.
Marcia brought up some information about some enhanced patrolling in the Pearl District. Can you update us on that?
Well, the enhanced patrols began about a week and a half ago, I think it was. And they are in the Old Town, Chinatown, Pearl neighborhoods, primarily north of Burnside, between the river out through the Pearl. They were designed to be visible presence with a focus on deterring crime that they came across or that people were reporting as happening right now. And so the focus on those has always been an increased visibility to try to deter crime and then addressing it where they find it.
How is that going?
I think almost every day I see some reports that they've been able to encounter crime wherever it's going to be. If you check the Police Bureau's website, you'll see some press releases. For example, last Friday, I believe it was, they were able to arrest a person that had actually a couple of different people for possessing or dealing drugs out in public.
Yeah, I saw them.
Yeah. We've also encountered people armed with handguns within the area that we've been able to take into custody. One individual was both a registered sex offender and a convicted felon that was found in possession of a firearm. That's the type of thing that we want to address, because the information that we were getting back from our community partners was that there were sections of downtown, specifically Old Town, Chinatown, and in some locations that would qualify as the Pearl, where it had kind of become a free-for-all, because honestly, the Police Bureau had really backed off and had probably not been doing the visible presence we should have from the outset. And we needed to go back and try to remind people of what acceptable behavior in public is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, thank you for the officers on the bicycles. I'm down in that whole entire Old Town area every single day, helping clients, working with the homeless. And the presence of the police on the bikes has really improved the overall behavior down there. I don't see it to be nearly as disruptive. There isn't as much garbage, but they're probably close to 100 tents in Old Chinatown area. So I just want everybody to know there's been an incredible presence of officers on bicyclists, and the people they work with are having conversations. And every day I'm down in the Old Town area, I'm always scoping out what's going on. They just finished loading the new tent village down there by the Greyhound. I was down there today and it's already got a wait list going. So I really encourage everyone on this committee to walk like I do every single day from like 6th Avenue or Broadway and Burnside all the way through Old Town. And you'll get a picture of what's going on and then go back a couple weeks from now, and I bet it'll be another major improvement. So I want to thank you, Mr. Fromm, for doing an awesome job bringing people to the streets that are kind and courteous. I've never seen anything negative. It's always been a positive interaction with folks. And I just want to encourage PCCEP that there really is good stuff going on, regardless of what you're all hearing. So as I would say, come on down and let's do a tour together. We'll walk in the war zone. So I just want to say thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you, Amy. Any additional PCCEP questions before opening to anyone else on the line?
Andrew, if I might, Amy's comments made me think of something that I had neglected. You know, the enhanced patrols also included, there was outreach that went on just before and continues to this day. We've had officers from the behavioral health unit and the service coordination team out attempting to make contact with people. I was told the other day that the two groups had made over 200 contacts within the Old Town area, offering what services they know they have available to people. So the emphasis is not purely enforcement, it's visibility, it's outreach, and it's enforcement when we find it.
Thank you. Any community feedback, any community questions for the Assistant Chief? I'm looking for your hands, so bear with me.
Andrew, you've
Andrew, you're muted.
You're yep.
You're on mute, Andrew. We can't hear you. There you
Got
go.
it. Thank you. I know we covered some of the turf that you were going to cover there, Assistant Chief, but I don't know if you have anything else to add before seating the dais here.
You muted again.
Did you hear me, Assistant Chief?
I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I apologize. I've gotten kicked off of Zoom twice in like the last 5 minutes, so I'm hoping that I will be able to stay this time. If you can please repeat for me.
Yeah, of course, that's fine. No, we've had some challenges. I know some of the questions just prompted you to go into some information about the additional patrols, but wanted to give you a chance to add anything else to the conversation before we move on to the next item of our agenda.
No, I'm good. Thank you for the opportunity, though.
Okay, looks like I'm
okay. I'm going to talk about community outreach, and Lakiana, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So obviously, one of the biggest pieces that PCCEP is trying to tackle right now is a challenge of community engagement, and really framing what that looks like and how we do it. Part of that includes we talked about this in the steering committee, taking a better documentation of the community engagements that's happening. A lot of it is kind of going unnoticed or just not really being documented in the way that we want it to be. And then continuing to not only just reach out to city partners, which I feel like we do a lot of, but also reaching out to everyday community members and community-based organizations. So there's a number of things that we'll highlight briefly here, but I think the biggest one that I wanted to touch on was a meeting that we had last Thursday with the Maci, or Friends of the Court, which is the Bynum Ministerial Alliance and the Mental Health Alliance. So last Thursday, myself, Andrew, the other co-chair, Marcia, who's the co-chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee, and then Vadim, who sits on the Behavioral Health Committee, were invited to a call with these groups, and that was part of a previously scheduled post. This is going to get a little confusing. Post settlement or status hearing meeting that happened in February. So this was kind of their post that meeting to kind of discuss, and then we were invited in. Really appreciated being invited. We weren't clear as to the context of the meeting, so we walked into it not really being able to fully understand it, but respond to it to the best of our ability. And what was presented in there was a 5-page document of recommendations for PCCEP, and we agreed principally on most of them, and were asked to respond to them. One of the immediate things, though, that came to mind was that, in the aftermath of that court hearing, PCCEP's strategy was to outreach to these groups and to hear from them directly about the recommendations that they have, because at the status hearing, they offered a lot of comments on them. And so that we really did welcome this meeting and finally having it set up, even though it wasn't, like I mentioned, in a way that we felt most prepared to, but it was a step in the right direction. And so this 5-page document was presented, which we then turned and gave to the our full committee. And a couple of the takeaways from that meeting that I thought as it was happening was, I believe that future meetings like that should be public, so that the public can be part of that conversation, that they should be open to the entire PCCEP committee so they can weigh in on it. And then if we need further, discussions on a smaller basis, those can certainly happen. And the asks that we took out of that was for the Bynum Ministerial Alliance to meet, and the Mental Health Alliance to meet with us quarterly on a quarter basis as part of a big group, and then give smaller presentations to the subcommittees that best represent the constituents that they represent, including the Racial Equity Subcommittee and the Mental Health, the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. So that is our hope, that they will join us at those meetings and then have a chance further to break down the recommendations that they presented. Like I said, it's a 5-page document given to a list of 13 volunteer committee members. So we also have to work through that and see what is tangible for our group to be able to do. Everything, if we had the power, time, and energy to do it, would seem like a great recommendation, but we really have to prioritize the highest piece recommendations, and then look at what is actually feasible. I want to talk about something different, but before I go to that, I want to just offer if Andrew, Vadim, or Marcia want to weigh in on any of their thoughts from that meeting.
Just one thing to add from me, and that is that I agree with how Lakiana described the recommendations about how PCCEP could be more effective. There are a lot of great things there. I think it is important for everybody to recognize that PCCEP, of course, has a role to play in making Portland a more just place, a more equitable place, a place where the communities are stronger tomorrow than they are today. But that we have one role, and that it's a relatively circumscribed role, and that there are a lot of factors that go into making a community healthy and strong. And so I think it's important for the future of this group and for the future of the effort that we all have signed up to try to achieve, to understand that we're trying to do our part, our little sort of page of history, paragraph maybe. And so I think it's just important to keep that in mind, particularly because the folks who are part of this group are volunteers. This is not their full-time job. And I think it's important to set expectations that are consistent and commensurate with the volunteer nature of the role. And so we're going to try to do that going forward. People work very hard on this committee, and I'm sure that they will continue to do so. They don't have to take part. After all, they volunteered for this. But I also want to make sure that everybody understands that we can't be at this alone, and people can't just look to us as being able to solve every problem. And I'm not saying that folks are, but I think it is an important thing to keep in mind as we try to think through a strategic plan for PCCEP and what the ultimate goals are. Thanks.
Andrew or Vadim, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just quickly, I really was happy to hear that these groups would be willing to not only meet with us, but also use their outreach in order to help with, I think, what the mission of PCCEP is, which is the community outreach piece. There's a lot of asks and recommendation, 5 pages of things they'd like to see PCCEP do with respect to oversight of the police bureau, as well as our own individual outreach. But as with everything else, we can get more done as a group than we can individually. And so I was glad to hear not only that they would consider meeting with us, but also some mention that they would be willing to kind of stretch their own or touch with their own outreach circles and help us in that avenue.
I think I echo what you all have mentioned in regards to community engagement. I think that it was validating to hear that they're willing to collaborate. And I think through strengthen collaborative efforts, we can avoid duplication and build capacity with like already existing networks that they seem to have. And so I'm looking forward to meeting more frequently with that group.
And one thing that I spoke with PCCEP about was making sure that that relationship is a two-way street. You know, like I said, we want their participation in our meetings. I don't know if either members of either of the group are here right now. Is there anybody from Mental Health Alliance or the Bynum Ministerial Alliance on the call?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Who is that? Was that Patrick?
Yes.
Oh, Patrick. What's up, Patrick? Yeah, so yeah, we want to see their participation and help and support in getting all this done and really working with us. Like I said, we went through 5 pages and I don't think there was one thing on that list that we fundamentally disagreed with. So really looking forward to building that. I want to kick it over to Marcia to talk about a meeting that the Racial Equity Subcommittee had with a community group, and it's kind of in that vein of more community outreach to community-based organizations, just to give a brief update on that meeting.
Are you referring to Civic Life or Oregon Justice?
Yes, Oregon Justice Resource Center. But you can touch on both if you want.
Yeah, so I had a really great meeting with Civic Life and was able to learn a little bit more about what they were doing. And they then introduced me to folks over at with the Portland United Against Hate, and that was also really great to have them. On Friday, we met with Oregon Justice Resource Center. We talked about kind of their perspective and ways that we could improve in the Racial Equity Subcommittee and as PCCEP as a whole, talking about ways that we can create a fundamental acknowledgement of just the history of Portland police in our community and what would it look like for us to move forward and build equity in our responses. You know, in meeting and hearing from the chief, she talked about, you know, that it's not the number of calls that are made, but the how PPB is responding, the quality of the response. And so we were able to kind of talk with OJRC and just listen to what their perspective was and what the community felt. And I don't know if Elliot, you want to add anything, but I found it to be really helpful and insightful just to learn about how they're seeing our work as.
Yeah, I have nothing to
add. That's all I have. Do you have anything to add, Lakiana?
No, I did get a request from Dan to speak from AMAC's perspective on how last Thursday's meeting went. So what we'll do is he'll be representing that group to respond, and then we'll open it up to, or just to add, not even really to respond, but just to add to thoughts on it, and then we'll open it up to PCCEP comment and then community comment. So Dan, go ahead. I don't know if someone has to unmute him or where he's at on the list of people, but if someone can figure that out, Theo.
Should be unmuted.
Yeah, he's not muted right now.
All right, Dan, you're good to go. As soon as he pops back on, we'll get to that. There was also a request from Anne to make that 5-page document, the recommendations, public. We're going to consult with the city attorney, make sure that that's good, but I see no problem in not doing that. I shared it right after the meeting with the rest of the PCCEP, so I would imagine that. But let's open it up to PCCEP comments on community engagement on either of those meetings or anything else that was mentioned there. We'll go with Amy first.
Okay, Lakiana, after reading the whole 5-page document, it took me like 30 seconds, basically. Most of what's in there is probably already in our bylaws and definitely in our PCCEP plan. And I'm gonna keep going back to the settlement agreement, and the reason we're all here is to bring a better relationship between the people with behavioral health concerns and the police. And so a lot of stuff that was written in that document seemed to be utterly ridiculous, and thinking that we're going to go out and get 2,000 Twitter fans or Facebook fans. Some of it sounded really derogatory, like they really wanted us to fail. So I encourage everyone to read that document with a different set of eyes, because I was not impressed whatsoever with what was in it, and a lot of the recommendations we should already be doing. And I really think we need to focus back to the PCCEP plan, which kind of tells us how we function, how we come on board, and the whole process. And I don't know why we're taking recommendations on stuff we already have printed. So I guess from my perspective, community engagement for me is bringing people with lived experience to the table to share their experience with the police. So I don't know how much further out I want to go with groups that keep reflecting things that are not part of our plan. But I really think the PCCEP plan, Exhibit 2, I sent it out to everyone, is a document we need to keep reflecting back on, or the bylaws, because everything was written in the bylaws. So I just got to tell you, there really wasn't much in there that I found beyond what's already, that everyone has already created. And I think we need to look at really going back to what's in our plan and focus on community engagement opportunities with advisory committees and things that are already in place. New people coming on board is a great idea, but I'm not sure how that connects to people with behavioral health concerns. So that's just my take on it. I would suggest everybody read it carefully, but it's pretty much solidifies what we already have in place. And the list of names they put on the front page is a good copy and paste list. Just about every agency has it on their list. So let's add some new ones. Let's find some new folks, and then we can move our concerns forward, but not if we keep going around the same merry-go-round. So that's just kind of my take on things. And I just want you all to know I'm really happy with the work we're doing, but we need a little more focus going back to the reason why we're all here. And that is the settlement agreement and the PCCEP plan. So thank you. That's my take.
Great. Andre, did I see your hand up? Nope. Okay, so we're going to go with Elliot. I did see Elliot's hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Amy, I read the document a little bit differently as coming from the MAC Behavioral Health Association groups, which as I understood it, were very much involved with the creation of PCCEP in the first place. And so I see them as precisely our constituency community groups who have been leading in these efforts to engage the police. I also think that as I read the charge to PCCEP, it is broadly about policing. Obviously, one of the issues is people suffering mental health crises, but also there are other issues that I think are within our purview. Disproportionate policing of other marginalized populations, including houseless, including non-white populations in the city. And so I guess I see our charge as not only having to do with the settlement agreement with DOJ, but going beyond that and thinking about constitutional policing, and even, as the mayor said, above constitutional standards for policing. And so I think that those recommendations can be helpful. Some of those recommendations can be helpful for engaging the community on all of those issues.
Thank you, Elliot. I got Taji, and then Yeah, well, Taj.
Oh, no, I was just I was sort of like, if I could snap, it's that sort of thing I was trying to do.
Gotcha.
Sorry.
To whose comment? Taji, was that to Elliot, or was it?
Oh yeah, yeah, that was me agreeing with what Elliot was saying. Excuse me.
Got it. Okay. Any other PCCEP comment? Okay, we got Dan back on the line. So Dan, if you want to unmute yourself and add your comments from MAC's perspective, and then we will open it up to community comments.
All right. Yeah, sorry, my phone got disconnected before. Yeah, this is Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. I am a member of the AMA Coalition Steering Committee. I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of them, but I was on that call last week, and I did help draft the document you're all talking about. And just, I think Mr. Young kind of covered this a little bit, but the court's direction to the city and the other parties was to come up with some metrics by which a year from now, we can decide whether or not the PCCEP is fulfilling the functions that were envisioned for it when it was created. So that was the idea of the document. I understand your concerns that there are a lot of very many detailed things that it would be hard for a group to necessarily complete, especially because there's less than a year until January now, when the DOJ is going to be deciding whether or not PCCEP has met all the standards. But this is more the judge's question about what does the community, or what do the community groups who are part of this lawsuit see as how we can gauge whether the PCCEP is being successful. So I hope that it is taken in that spirit.
Thank you. We're going to open it up to public comment. If you can please use the hand raise button if possible. I think it's available on the phone and in person. And if you can't, just raise your hand and I will try and look for you. Am I missing anybody there? No. Okay, so we are good on that piece. We have a 10-minute break. So we'll take that and we'll come back at, let's see, what time is it right now? It's 6:06. So we'll come back at 6:35. It looks like we do have a comment from the city on that. So we'll take that and then take our break. So I believe that might be Tracy, but I'm not sure who that is. Oh, or maybe that was.
There's no city comment, like, yeah. I just wanted to mention that I didn't mention at the beginning of the meeting because we got caught up in the captioning thing that the order of commenting is going to go PCCEP comment first, just specifically PCCEP comment, PCCEP members, and then community comment. And then if the city or any police officers or city workers or employed officials, if they have any comment, they go after the community. So I just wanted to, before we get into the break, just give space in case any members of PPB or the city have any comments after community, that now would be the time. But if not, then go to break.
Okay, cool. Any city comment? Okay, cool. We'll take that break. We'll be back at 6:35 on my phone, so don't go too far. We'll see you soon. Andrew's up on this part.
Thank you very much. So we're going to have a wide-ranging discussion about data this evening, but we're going to, I think, start by focusing specifically on use of force data. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Elliot, who has prepared a short presentation. We're also going to hear from a number of other folks tonight on this same topic and hopefully have a robust conversation about it. So Elliot, lead the way for us if you can.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen. Britt, could you allow me to share my screen?
Yep, 1 second. I feel like you should be able to. It's just the green button.
It says disabled. I think you have to make me co-host.
Oh, I'll make you co-host. 1 second. Oh, actually, I can't do that. Only the host can, but I can let you share the screen. So I'll do that. Now you should be able to go.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so let me share the screen. Are you seeing the?
We are.
Okay, great. Slideshow started. Okay, so this is an effort to get PCCEP to really dig into data, which is part of our charge to look at data that's being produced by the Portland Police Bureau. And we thought we'd start with a great dashboard to let PCCEP members, but also the community know that this information exists out there. And of course, like all data, it can be interpreted a number of ways. And we wanted to start by presenting it and then having the Portland Police present an analysis. And we've invited Sam Singyangwe from Campaign Zero, who's a data scientist, to talk a little bit about benchmarks and present his own analysis. So you could see the URL is there for where this dashboard is. If you type into Google use of force PPB, it'll come up. So it's very easy to find, and I encourage people to look into that data more specifically. So the question, I think the most complicated question is about what should the benchmark be for determining disproportionate policing. So we have a sense of there's so many use of force incidents. That's broken down by various demographics, including race, ethnicity, houselessness, people experiencing a mental health crisis. And one of the questions is, does this data suggest disproportionate policing? And to be able to determine that, you need to have a baseline. So in other words, if there were proportional policing, what would these statistics look like? The most common, I think, benchmark that people use is the Census Bureau data. And that provides the race and ethnicity by county according to the census. What I have listed here is from the PPB's STOPS data annual report, which shows the growth between 2010 2018. But essentially, if you take the 2018 estimates, it shows 8% Asian, close to 6% Black or African American, close to 12% Hispanic, and then smaller numbers for other groups, and then about 69% for white. Now that's just Multnomah County. What are some of the limitations of this data? First of all, this data is specific to Multnomah County, and as we know, Portland encompasses multiple counties, so that wouldn't necessarily exactly represent it. The other limitation is that this kind of data does not indicate demographic differences among neighborhoods. So in other words, if it happens to be more policing in a particular neighborhood, and the demographic of that neighborhood is different than the average demographic in Multnomah County, then you might end up, bench line or the benchmark might be different. But I think this average benchmark gives a beginning sense to try to get a sense of whether there's disproportionality of policing. Now, one of the other questions besides race and ethnicity is the number of houseless people who are subjects of use of force incidents. And getting an estimate on the houseless population is notoriously difficult. There are various estimates out there. The estimate that I show here is from a PSU report, which aims to take the latest data from 2017, and they estimate that the houseless population was 2%. Now, what we've seen over the couple of years since then is that the number of people on the streets or in shelters and the chronically homeless have increased, but actually the overall estimate of the homeless population has decreased. So 2%, other people say 3%, but roughly that is the presence in the population of houseless people. I think for people with mental illness, it's even more complicated, so I won't get into that because I don't really know how to determine that. So if we look at this chart shows use of force types by subject status. So basically, it says what are the kinds of use of force incidents that are happening in the city. And you could see by looking at those totals over on the right that control against resistance and resisted handcuffs account for the bulk of the incidents. Those are by far the largest numbers. After that, you have takedown categories 2 and 3, pointing of a firearm, and takedown 4. And I've included the definitions of those different takedown definitions just so you know what they are. The 2 and 3 force category includes strikes, kicks, aerosol restraint, canine bite. Category 4 includes a baton, non-strike, resisting handcuffs, control against resistance. So there's kind of different levels of these use of force incidents. Okay, this one of the ways you could use this dashboard is by taking the data and looking either at particular quarterly reports on that data or looking at the data overall. And it's important when looking at this data to know that in October of 2017, or up until October of 2017, use of force was defined differently. So a lot of the lesser forms of force, control against resistance, the handcuffing, was not actually being tracked. So to have an accurate comparison, you really should be comparing October 2017 data forward. Looking at the stuff before then, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. So what I see when I look at this chart is that there has been great variation over the last 2 years. You know, the chart goes up, it goes down, it goes back up, it goes back down. If you look at the averages for use of force, applications of force, it's roughly where we are today. This is the latest data, February 2020, is roughly about the average. So it's hard to say whether there's a trajectory because it keeps going up and down. So one of the questions you could ask is, why is there such great variation between quarters? And I think the Portland Police Bureau might be able to explain this. And is there an explanation for why total force incidents have declined or increased at particular moments? And this would be key if the goal is to reduce use of force incidents, then to try to understand what was going on in terms of policy or what was going on in terms of context to understand why we get declines and increases in use of force. And finally, if you look at that gray column at the bottom, unique force events, you'll see that there were higher numbers sort of October 2017 to June 2018. And actually in the last few quarters, the numbers have been closer to 50 or 60. So there has been a decline there. What accounts for that decline, so that we could perhaps build on the successes that represents? Okay, now turning to the demographics, because this is data is also broken down by race, and you could see that in the last quarter, which is that column on the right, January through March of 2020, if you go to the column on individuals in force incidents, you could see that people who are Black make up 25.9, 26% of those incidents. For white Portlanders, it's 59%. So if you were to take the baseline as the Census Bureau data, presence in the population, it would clearly seem like disproportionate policing of Black Portlanders. Black Portlanders are way more likely than a white Portlander to be involved in a use of force incident. And then if you turn to the data at the bottom, it shows what the subject status was by race. And so it breaks it down also into houseless population. And this bottom chart on the left shows the percentages over 2 years. So the data is more robust because it's not just taking one particular quarter. And there you see 49%, almost half of the use of force incidents over the last 2 years have involved people who are houseless. About 15% people who are suffering from a mental health crisis. So in terms of the houseless population, that is kind of a stunning figure, because if 2 to 3% of the city's population is houseless, they are much more likely than the regular housed population to be involved in these use of force incidents. And we could talk about the reasons why that is, but I think, when looking at this data, that's one of the points that raised concern for me. And finally, if you dig down even deeper into the data, there is information about officer-involved shootings. And the data goes from 2010 to 2019. There's been a range from 2 to 6 people involved in officer-involved shootings since 2010. The highest number of fatalities were in 2010 and last year, which included 5 fatalities. And 85% of the cases, in 85% of the cases, the subject was armed with a weapon. So it suggests that there is sort of a higher threat that exists. But what's interesting is that in 94% of these officer-involved shootings, the officer perceived that the subject was armed. So there's a good 11% of the times when the subject was not armed, but the officer perceived the person to be armed, and therefore was more likely to use something like shooting in those incidents. And that's something I think that training might look into. Why in a significant number of cases is there such a high perception of that a subject is armed when in fact they are found not to be armed? So finally, I'll just conclude with these questions. I think we're digging into these, and rather than having statements, I wanted to end with questions. So what are the appropriate benchmarks for use of force incidents to determine whether disproportionate policing is occurring? And we talked about that at the beginning. what measures have been effective in lowering overall use of force incidents? Because one issue is disproportionate policing of marginalized population, but the other question is just whether the total numbers go down or up. You could have proportionality, but if the numbers are going up, that's not a success. So we have to look at both proportionality as well as total numbers. And another question is, what measures have been effective in reducing disproportionate outcomes for marginalized groups, and particularly looking at race, ethnicity, homeless population, and people experiencing mental health crisis. And finally, just asking the Portland Police, what is their plan for bringing down the overall number of use of force incidents and for reducing disproportionality, if in fact they see disproportionality in the data. So I'm gonna stop sharing there and turn it back over to Andrew. Great. And I think he's gonna turn it over to the police.
Yes, thanks very much, Elliot. Those are key questions that you've teed up, and we can dig deeper into those as the conversation goes on. But we did want to turn it to the Portland Police Bureau. I know that we have a number of folks on who are going to provide different portions of this segment. I think we're going to start with a member of the Office of the Inspector General, specifically the Force Inspector, Lieutenant Jeff Nia. Lieutenant, if you are on the line, it is your time.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Jeff Nia. I'm a lieutenant with the Police Bureau, currently assigned as the Force Inspector. I'm going to just take a few minutes of your time to kind of give you an overview of how we are collecting the data that was just presented, and then I'll turn it over to one of my team members, an analyst, to get more in depth of that. Can I share my screen? Whoever was it Mr. Bosbeck?
Yeah, I just allowed you to. You should be able to now.
All right, stand by. Let me see if I can get this up and running for sharing screen. All right, can you guys see my screen okay?
We can. Thank you, Britt.
Okay. All right, so just go over really quick. This is the force data collection report. This is the report that the officers fill out anytime they have a force event. As you can see, this form prompts people to click a box and then write an explanation, so give a narrative as well. We are trying to capture the data that is required by the policies and originally the settlement agreement, but currently in our policies, and that we use to create the reports. So you can see this form is pretty robust with the information that we're asking officers to collect every time they use force. And you saw the categories of force earlier. So our force events cover everything from a person who pulls away while getting handcuffed, all the way to the taser, the strikes, the kicks, the takedowns, those kind of things. This form and my office do not deal with deadly force, so we do not handle the officer-involved shootings. So everything up to that level we would look at as far as the force events go for the category 4 through 2 events. Once the officers complete this report, that's not the entire end of our reporting. We then ask our supervisors and our command staff to review the force events and look at it at a holistic event from beginning to end and the decisions that were made by the officers. So they do that in an after-action form. And this is that form here. Again, we have a lot of drop downs and prompts. What we've tried to do with both the FDCR and the after action is create this again as a checklist so that we are collecting all the data required of us and not missing things. So we do not want people to leave things out. And so we use these prompts to really allow them to go through line by line, evaluate the force and all the reports around that force, and then come to some opinions, conclusions, looking at policy level, training level, and any areas of improvement that could have been done at the officer level. That then is moved up to the lieutenant and sometimes the captain of the RU, and then sometimes the chief's office, depending on the level of review. Every after action gets looked at least by a lieutenant in the Bureau. All these after actions and reports then come to my office and I review them. as well for policy training and other, I guess, same kind of things, looking at ways to improve. I provide feedback when necessary. And then my analysts also go through each one of these, gathering the data, and then use this data to create the reports and do the auditing against the methodology. So what I'll do at this point is basically let my team member, Shannon, who's one of my analysts, talk to you a little bit about how this looks after we get this information here. So I'm going to stop sharing here real quick and turn it over to Shannon.
Hello, my name's Shannon Smith. I'm an analyst with the Portland Police Bureau, and I work with Lieutenant Nia in the Office of the Inspector General. I perform the data collection and analysis duties of non-deadly use of force incidents. I've been with the Bureau for about 5 years, and I've been an analyst in that time. Prior to working at PPB, I worked for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department as a crime analyst, and I did that for about 8 years. I'm also a certified law enforcement auditor. Mr. Elliott covered a lot of the caveats I had about our data and explaining the data to you, but I'll go through some of them real briefly and just kind of explain how we collect the data, some of the analysis we do on it, and the benchmarks that we recommend in terms of analyzing demographic data. So myself and 2 other analysts perform this work. We utilize those reports that Lieutenant Nia just showed you. We also utilize all the other reports because officers have to fill out general offense reports. There's CAD summary reports as well. Basically, we review all the reports to collect approximately 40 variables that we use in our analysis. Those variables are used on the dashboard, and they're also used in the force summary report, which is a static report, and both are published on PPB's website for the public. Some of the variables that we collect include subject demographic information, age, race, gender. We collect, pardon me, and report weapon information, resistance, subject conditions such as mental health crisis, whether the subject is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and initial call types, whether it's officer initiated or the citizen calls the officer, total applications used for each force type, as well as just general force type used, yes or no. So that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind, is that we do report force in 2 forms, which Mr. Elliott did touch on, whether force type was used or not, as well as the total applications. That information is aggregated by officer-subject interactions. So every force data collection report you can think of as an officer-subject interaction. And there are variables that are subject-specific, officer-subject-specific. There are variables that are event-level specific, such as the call type, things of that nature. And then there are variables that are officer-specific, such as precinct and things like that. And if you look at the data behind the dashboard, because everyone can download the data behind the dashboard, you'll see each line of data represents basically a force data collection report, an FDCR. And it's important, if you're doing your own analysis, to keep in mind that you do have to collapse that data based on whether you're looking at officer variables, subject variables, or event level variables. As Mr. Elliott touched on, Mr. Young touched on, PPB has been collecting use of force data since 2004. And they've been reporting it since 2013, but you really can't do long-term analysis of the data because of all the changes in policy. Particularly in Q3 2017, we added 10 additional force types. 2 of those force types were control against resistance and resisted handcuffing. Those make up over 50% of the force that's used by Portland Police Bureau officers. And it definitely, looking at numbers over time, definitely skews the data. It's added many more subjects as well as just an increase in raw numbers. As far as benchmarks to use, you'll notice in our forced summary report that we use custodies most often. And the reason being is, pardon me, the reason being is that the use of force is often just an outcome of custody. There's actually less than 1% of, pardon me, I have to take a drink. There's actually just 1% of force incidents that do not involve a custody, or actually it's less than 1%. So because it's an outcome of a custody, we compare it to the overall custody demographic population to do our demographic analysis. And that's the benchmark that we use. The other point I wanted to make, when he was reporting on the houseless number, we do add that to our data. It was a request from the public, but just know that's not a real, so officers report that, but it's not a data point that they collect in using a sturdy methodology. Sometimes the field is left blank because the person refuses to give their address. So that's categorized as houseless. So that's not a real, I guess, reliable number. It's a number. It's the only data point that we have for that. It also isn't available in our arrest data because it isn't collected there at all. So we can't do comparisons between non-forced population to a forced population from the arrest data on many of our data points, actually. But houseless would be another one that we can't do that on. So those are two important points that I wanted to make. But sorry, that was brief and fast. Questions?
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. I'm sure that there will be questions from PCCEP members and the public. In fact, we've already had one come in through the chat, and I appreciate the quick response, Lieutenant. I will read the question and the answer once we get to the question and answer session. Before we turn to that, though, we have one more invited guest who is well known in this arena, which in particular sort of data analytics when it comes to law enforcement, but that is sort of one of many expertises that he carries. Samuel, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and provide a little bit more context as you see it when you take a look at these numbers and the issues surrounding data collection.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. So going over the Portland Police Use of Force dashboard.
Before you do that,
it was interesting to hear the previous presentation.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just before you do that, just introduce yourself to make sure everybody knows who you are.
Sure. So I'm Sam Sinyangwe, co-founder of Campaign Zero, which is a nationwide organization focused on addressing police violence and accountability across the country. In reviewing the information that has been made public on Portland Police Bureau's Use of Force dashboard, in the previous presentation, we heard that custodies was the benchmark that was being used. There are, in the research literature, there are two benchmarks that are most commonly used to evaluate use of force. The first is per population, so a per capita rate of use of force, benchmarked by the population as determined by the US Census. And I believe Elliot presented what that looks like, with Portland having about 6% of the population being Black, and a substantially higher proportion of the population. I believe in 2018, it was about 28% of the use of force incidents involved somebody who was Black. Custodies is another benchmark, or arrests is another benchmark that tends to be used to evaluate use of force. But just to understand the difference between using those two benchmarks. So when we're looking at use of force per population, what we are evaluating is, what is your risk as somebody in the general population of receiving police use of force based on race. So for example, if you are Black, you have a much higher likelihood of being subject to police use of force than if you are white. That is clear because 6% of the population is Black, 28% of those in 2018 who received use of force, according to the most recent data the Portland Police Bureau website were Black. If you benchmark by custodies, what you are saying is after the decision to already arrest or put somebody into custody, what is the likelihood that police will use force during that particular interaction? That's a different question, right? And so if we evaluate police use of force based on custodies, what we are saying is all of the potential racial disparities and bias that might be in play in the decision by the officer to stop that person and then decide to apprehend or arrest them, that no longer is considered in the calculation of racial disparity. Instead, what we are just going to be looking at is what is the likelihood that the officer will use force while putting that person into custody. That is a different question. Both of those questions are important to understand and to visualize and to analyze. I don't think that, so understanding the rate per population is important because that is the overall risk to a population of experiencing police use of force. However, understanding the rate per arrest or per custody is important to understanding once the decision has been made to arrest somebody, what are the particular practices that are being that are coming into play with regard to how police are conducting that arrest. So if there is a disparity there, and indeed it looks like according to the data by Portland Police Bureau, so Portland Police Bureau reported that 24% of all arrests, according to the Uniform Crime Report, were of Black people. 24% of all arrests by Portland Police Bureau in 2018, whereas 28% of all use of force incidents were of Black people, right? So there's still a disparity there. It is less of a disparity than the 6% versus 28%, but there's still a disparity. What that indicates, if you visualize both, what that tells the person in the community or the person reviewing the data, it tells you that not only is there a disparity in terms of arrest, your likelihood of being arrested, but there's also disparity once you are being arrested of experiencing police use of force. And both of those indicators are important to understanding what are the policy solutions to reduce use of force. Because if the disparity is predominantly in the arrests, in the decision to arrest somebody, the solutions may look like decriminalizing certain offenses, addressing arrest disparities for example, particular drug offenses, and other things where there are particular disparities, and we know that those disparities don't necessarily reflect the proportion of drug use or of criminal behavior, but rather the way in which those things are being enforced. Whereas if there's a disparity with regard to use of force benchmarked by arrest, means that the use of force policies and practices of the department are called into question regarding how they conduct those arrests after the decision to make the arrest has already been made. So both of those are commonly used. I would push for both of those to be represented just so that the community can understand where the disparities actually occur so that they can be better informed as to where to intervene to reduce those disparities.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time and for your efforts, not only to help us better understand things in Portland, but also across the country. It's greatly appreciated. We are limited in time. We could go on and on about this, and we very well might in subcommittee meetings and additional meetings, but we should turn next to PCCEP comment and then get comment and question from other folks on the line. So I'll start with fellow members of PCCEP. Questions for any of the presenters. Amy, lead the way.
Yes, oh, what a great presentation, thank you. My question is, looking at your chart, everybody's charts, Elliot's chart, thank you, Elliot, that was awesome. I noticed there was 53% of that population was either drug or alcohol, kind of like involved. And I'm wondering how many of those contacts with weapons were also drug involved. That was question number one. Question number two is, how many of the arrests are what I call people who violated parole and probation and or failure to appears? Because it may seem as though certain populations are getting arrested more often than others. There's a huge amount of people not appearing to court, which are causing failure to appears, which are causing arrests, which are causing people to have to stop and pick them up. So I'm curious to get a little more input on the scenario between the failure to appears, the having criminality already, like parole and probation violation, and or involvement with drugs and weapons, percentage wise. Does anybody have that data?
Lieutenant, can you speak to that, or whether that type of data is collected, or Ms. Smith, either of you?
We do collect the data. It's not in our reports. I know in the dashboard there are ways to filter, so I may be able to figure out a way to filter to get to your first question regarding the drug and alcohol and weapon piece of it. But as far as we do collect the arrests, whether they were arrested on a warrant or something like that information. So I'd have to look into that to get you that piece. And also I'll look into the dashboard to get you the information on whether or not you can find that filtering by the dashboard. The dashboard can filter all sorts of ways. I haven't played with them all, so I'll have to look into that for you. I'm sorry, I don't have that answer.
No, that's fine. I wasn't sure. It's just something I've been thinking about, because looking at numbers and working with certain populations, I'm beginning to notice a pattern of repeat interactions with officers because they keep failing to appear to their court dates. So I just was curious about the ratio, the numbers of arrests, just based on a couple of different factors. That's all. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
Thank you. Vadim?
Yes, I have just a question for Mr. Siangwei, if he's still on the line. First of all, thank you very much for attending our meeting. I've had the pleasure of reviewing some of your literature out there in your talks, and it's been very informative, and I personally learned a lot, so thank you for taking time and being here. I did have a question about how Portland, if you've delved into the demographics here and the arrest numbers and the use of force numbers, perhaps measures up to other cities of the same size. And I ask that because I look in the policescorecard.org website, which I think is associated with you, and most cities in California seem to get Fs. The vast majority are Fs, some Ds, and only 3 received Bs, the highest overall grade is a B from Tracy, California, which has about 80,000 people. And even there, the arrests for African-American individuals is twice their population. And that's in a small town of 80,000 people. Is there any place where you've seen that could be a gold standard where we could say, okay, here's what another city is doing, and you think the demographics and the numbers there look good, and then we can see what may be the difference in their police force and other police force, or something along those lines?
So it's a great question. It's actually, you mentioned the Police Scorecard project that we've currently released, which is focused on California. We do have some data from Portland and departments across the country that we'll be releasing soon, which will provide a little bit more insight into how Portland compares to other police departments across the country. But a preliminary analysis indicates that Portland is about average in terms of the overall rate of use of force, particularly with regard to less lethal force, so force involving weapons, which is the category that we use to compare across departments, because as you know, departments often report force differently, and many departments don't report certain types of force that don't involve weapons. That being said, with regard to disparities and with regard to best practices, there are a few departments that have made substantial progress in reducing use of force, and particularly reducing police shootings and some of the more higher levels of force. I would say Oakland is one of those departments to look to in terms of reducing police shootings. So you look at Oakland's data going back several years, and about 6 or 7 years ago, Oakland was averaging between 7 and 8 police shootings a year. It was about that every single year going back 10, 15 years. And then they implemented a number of policy changes. They had a Department of Justice intervention. They changed their accountability system. They implemented new training procedures, and they substantially reduced deadly force to now they average between 0 and 1 police shooting a year, and it's been that way for several years now. which is a far lower rate than other similar sized departments across the country. So Oakland is one of those examples with a substantial reduction. Stockton is another one of those examples. Similar story there. It's a slightly less of a reduction than Oakland, but it's another department that has achieved substantial reductions. I'd be happy to work with you, offline and moving forward around sharing some of the additional data we have on departments across the country. Again, this project is ongoing, and we're continuing to build and include additional departments from other states, because we recognize that we started in California, but this is a project that can add value across the board. Overall, those are two departments I would look to that have actually achieved substantial reductions in use of force overall, and in particular deadly force, including in the racial disparity they're in. But essentially, if you're looking at Oakland, they've brought police shootings down almost to zero. So there's not only no disparity, but there's almost no instances that are in the analysis because of that. So those are two examples that I would point to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lakiane, I see your hand raised. Lakiane, if you could unmute that bit.
Ooh, thank you for stopping me before I got too far along in that. I don't have a specific question. I just have a comment and a thought. I shared this with Elliot earlier, and maybe a few others, but I think the data is important. I think it is useful in the conversation, but I only think it is useful if we can come to an agreement that there is a problem, and that that we want to make a shift in the way we are doing things. Because other than that, I just see data being used, could be used by either side to either unexplain a problem or to try and point out one. And unless we come to a fundamental understanding that there is a problem exists, and like defining what that problem is, because when you look at use of force statistics, that's just one piece of the problem, right? There's stops data, there's the trust factor. And so I'm strongly going to push this committee, strongly going to urge the Bureau to find a way to acknowledge the problem, the larger problem at hand of why this is happening. I know it's a really challenging thing to look at, but I don't see data being helpful. I would love to look into Oakland and Stockton and see what they've done there, but I don't see data being helpful unless that we acknowledge a problem exists and that we want to take steps in a different direction. So that would be my comment.
Thank you. Any other PCCEP comments, Andre?
I have a question for Mr. Siangwe. You had mentioned Oakland, Stockton, and I understand that most of your analysis was probably looking at just the data, but do you have a sense of how, what harm and force reduction practices and trainings they might employ that PPP might not or might? I guess, do you have a sense of what the lessons can be learned from those two cities?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and frankly, you'd probably be better served working directly with the folks who have been on the ground, like in Oakland, organizing and winning those policy victories. But there have been a couple of things that have stood out. So first and foremost, a use of force policy that is substantially more restrictive. So adopting a new use of force policy that includes a affirmative restriction on using deadly force until all other means have been exhausted. A policy requiring de-escalation, requiring officers to intervene, requiring officers to report even when they point a firearm, even if they don't discharge it. Some of those things are in place in Portland, some of them are not. The other things involve a reduction in arrests, particularly for low-level offenses. So some of the departments that have had the largest reductions in police shootings have also had some of the largest reductions in arrests, particularly for low-level offenses, things like drug possession, disorderly conduct, open container of alcohol, things like that, where alternative approaches are brought in. Also, mental health crises are dealt with in a different way. So you have mental health responders or co-responder teams engaging folks in those situations instead of just a police officer. So those are some of the things that have been implemented. In addition, there are some changes to the accountability structure. So the establishment of an effective early warning system that can identify which officers have multiple use of force incidents, and intervene to actually effectively not only sort of counsel or provide some sort of training and retraining, but actually if they are demonstrating that pattern over time, they are removed from those situations so that this does not escalate to deadly force or another situation. So there are a couple of things like that that are really important that we've seen, particularly in Oakland. A lot of that is in response to the intervention from the Justice Department in the early 2000s that sort of was a catalyst for these reforms. Nevertheless, I think that these are some things that can be replicated in cities across the country, including Portland. Finally, there's the issue of the police union contract, which I know myself and my colleague DeRay presented on extensively last year, and the ways in which police union contracts often make it difficult to implement some of those solutions, and some, especially with regard to accountability. But a combination of stricter policies regarding use of force, a combination of retraining to make sure that officers understand and can implement those policies, and then an accountability structure that's unencumbered or unobstructed to actually enforce those policies. Those are the things that are important in addition to citywide policies decriminalizing or deprioritizing certain types of enforcement for low-level offenses.
Thank you so much.
Elliot?
I just want to turn Lakiana's comment into a question, because there was a question lurking there, and maybe I'll direct it to Officer Nia. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But Officer, if the question is, do you see, you've looked at this data, according to your analysis, do you see disproportionality in terms of certain populations? Do you see that there's a problem that needs to be addressed, or do you see that this seems in line with what you would expect in terms of the populations being arrested and use of force incidents?
I thank you for the question. So I do kind of agree with Lakiana that this is not just a data-driven argument, right? We can't just have a conversation about data. And I'll tell you the same thing I told the Training Advisory Committee as well, that the data that I'm looking at, the events that I'm looking at, the reports, it's two people that are involved in this, right? We have the officer that's involved with it and the community member that is also getting involved. I think trust is a huge factor in this, and why do people resist our efforts? You see in our data, the majority of our force is low level. It's putting people in handcuffs or just controlling them. Why are we having that resistance there? So those are the kind of questions that my data is not going to answer. We are not interviewing these people at the time of arrest, asking why they're pulling away from the officer. We try, but most of the time the people don't give the sergeant a straight up answer. There's no quantitative way to analyze those answers really, because there's not a standard methodology with that. So I think it is a larger question about that. So the disproportionality, we've looked at that. The data is not showing that with the testing against it. The other thing I bring into the fact that look at our calls for service versus our self-initiated as well. The majority of our responses are calls for service. Why is the community member calling 911 or non-emergency about the situation? Why are the officers getting sent there? One of the robust conversations we had at the Training Advisory Committee was about people calling about individuals in their neighborhood that don't fit in. We had African-American, that was talked about African-American people getting called in about walking through someone's neighborhood. Those officers are getting put in that situation. And then what precipitates that contact to go into potential arrest and a force event? That I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Marlon Marion, I don't know if you know Marlon. He's our equity manager at the Bureau. Marlon he's looking at that. His office is looking at that. I think it's a matter of time and data as well. But there needs to be a conversation in the Bureau as a whole, right? Not just with the force data that I'm looking at, but other instances of why we're getting called. So I do appreciate that this is a larger conversation, and we are happy to be a part of that.
Thank you. Any additional PCCEP comment before opening?
Yeah, if I can just add quickly, I do agree with Lakiana in that focusing on the statistics by themselves is perhaps not what PCCEP is endowed to do, which is community relations, reaching out to the community and the city and Portland Police, reviewing directives and getting feedback on directives, and providing community feedback in some sort of way to the mayor and the police chief. We can get lost in the reasons behind statistics as to whether data was entered correctly and what all that means and what parts of the city. I do very much agree with what Lakayana said, is if we're seeing an issue, if the community is bringing issues to us, we should find ways to address those issues in that respect. That's why I asked, what is the gold standard of any other city that's doing well, and perhaps we can see, what are the policy issues that they're dealing with, what have they done to improve, and so forth. I do recommend for everybody, though, if you're interested in use of force and use of deadly force, at least, OIR group does reviews of the Portland Police Bureau, each individual case, as to how deadly force is used and recommendations stemming from that. And their recommendations are pretty useful, I think. If you actually go in those reports, instead of saying there were only, or there were 6 fatalities, and that for certainly is a tragedy, but read through them. I encourage everyone on PCCEP especially, read through those individual reports as to the use of force, the shootings, and the deadly incidents, and try to understand what was going on and what the recommendations that OIR group made based on those incidents, as perhaps a launching point to determine, are people with behavioral health issues being treated disproportionately or unfairly by the Portland Police Bureau? And if so, what are the recommendations that have been made, and built upon those, seek community input, rather than just saying X number of this, Y number of that, it doesn't add up. I'd really like to delve into individual cases more than statistics.
Thank you, Vadim. I'm going to open it now to.
Hang on, Andrew, can I ask if any 3 of our youth members want to add anything to the conversation before we jump into community?
I would like to ask, or maybe just comment on, I agree with what Lakayana said, and I think that we should focus on having a conversation on why the city or the Bureau is not recognizing that there is an issue at hand here, and that from the information shared by Elliot and from Sam and from, all perspectives is, use of force being in this city that's disproportionately affecting communities of color, disproportionately affecting individuals that are in crisis, and that we should then take the steps necessary, as Lakayana mentioned, take the steps necessary to address those things and to address and utilize the power we have on this committee to engage on policy recommendations and things that were talked about in Sam's presentation about ways to change things in this city. And I think we have a lot of ability to do that, and we should focus on individual cases. As Vadim mentioned, we should focus on all of these things and start engaging in actually in this problem, and have the data be that sort of backed up point to it. Excuse me. And yeah, I just want to echo exactly what Lakayana was saying, that we should just start moving forward with actually implementing some of these steps, looking to how we can actually change things, and know that the narrative is already, there is a problem at hand, and we should work towards addressing it.
Thank you, Tashi. Okay, we're going to open it up to everyone on the call. So again, if you can raise your hand either physically or using the chat function, then I can see that you're interested in commenting or asking questions to any of our presenters. I see Barbara, you have your hand raised. Please feel free.
Hi, Barbara Boshinsky, Portland Cop Watch. I just have a question. I believe it was Mr. Young's chart. They talked about, there was when there was the numbers of percents of 85 and 94%, and how many people were armed. When you say a suspect was armed, does that mean like maybe they had it in their car under the seat? Does that mean it was accessible? Was the officer actually in danger? So I'd just like to know what that number actually means. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, the information on the website doesn't indicate whether they were using it or not using it. I assumed had it in the vicinity, in the possession, but perhaps Officer Naya or someone who knows the PPV data more specifically could answer that.
Yes, Mr. Young, I think in that slide that she's referring to, that was on your officer involved shooting slide, if I remember correctly. So my office does not handle those stats. And so I don't know exactly the interpretation of the data that's being collected at the time of the investigation for that. So I apologize, I can't answer that one more clearly.
Thank you.
We have a question from the chat about talking about gold standards, and I'll read it. Today, the city of Minneapolis fired 4 police officers for excessive use of force and killing a citizen. Has a PPB member ever been fired for use of force? I know this is slightly out of your lane, Lieutenant, so I don't know if you can comment on this or if others from the city who are on might be able to address this question.
Maybe Dan from Copwatch or some of the Copwatch people have that information.
Mary Claire still on?
I know specifically from when we were doing some of our trainings for PCCEP. Can anyone hear? I don't know if. Okay. And when we were doing our trainings for PCCEP, we learned about some of the catalysts for the DOJ settlement in 2010 and 2008, I believe. There was an incident with Aaron Campbell where he was an unarmed Black man who was killed by an officer when he was having a reaction to his brother being killed, I believe. And he was, I believe, terminated from his position and then reinstated after winning multiple cases with the support of the police union. So the city in and of itself and the Bureau fired him winning in court. He won in court after he went and appealed the case and was reinstated. I don't remember the officer's name specifically, but I'm pretty sure there's been incidents since then that I just couldn't think off the top of my head. But that one, the Bureau didn't obviously support the murder of Aaron Campbell, and so they fired him. And so it wasn't really like, it was more of the union that was the issue. And I think that was something that was touched on by Sam lightly about the implications of police unions in trying to have accountability.
Okay, thank you, Taji. If we have any additional response from the city or the Bureau, we'll be sure to post the answer somewhere so that you can see it. But thanks for using the chat box. Other comments? We have a hand from Copwatch. I don't know if that's also you, Barbara, but we have a hand up there.
That's just Dan.
Go right ahead.
This is Dan Handelman again from Portland Copwatch, and yes, it's Aaron Campbell was shot by Officer Ron Frashauer. He was fired, and an arbitrator decided to reinstate him. Part of the problem is the way that arbitrators have been looking at our.
Dan, just don't. I want to try to focus on the data. We're already at time, so I know we've talked about arbitration in the past, but if you have thoughts on data, would love to hear them.
Okay, well, the question came off of how often officers are fired, and one officer recently drove the wrong way down a off-ramp of a freeway and crashed, and the person he was chasing crashed and died, and the person who he crashed into lived, and they're going to get a $125,000 settlement from the city tomorrow. So I think that's of interest to your group. I do not agree with the statement that less than 1% of the people who are subjected to force do not end up in custody. Some of those custodies are mental health holds, which is not a police custody. So I think that number needs to be looked at more deeply. I also think in terms of the data that the timeline split at October 2017, it's very easy to take those 10 new categories of force and pull them out and then compare the other kinds of force from before and after. And I'm hoping somebody will do that. People keep saying it's apples and oranges, but it's not. It's apples with more apples thrown on top of it. Just take the extra apples out and then you can count them. And also just riffing a little bit off of what Barbara said, the weapons that were presented and deadly force situations, a lot of the time those are edged weapons. In fact, every shooting last year had to do with an edged weapon, not a gun. So the threat to the officers wasn't even that great. And I just want to add to the PCCEP members, I did send a link to you all for the most recent issue of our newsletter, which I would have handed to you if we had been in person, but you can look at it online.
Thank you. Anne, do you, I understand you might have a question.
I do. I have a question for Sam. Just looking at what's happened in Oakland, which is, in my view, good news, and we'd like to know exactly how they got there, I think. But does California have a law that allows officers who feel that their life is in danger or persons around the situation's life are in danger to shoot to kill?
So that is a great question. So California recently passed a law that is designed to change the deadly force standard from previously it had one of the oldest deadly force laws in the nation, a law adopted in the 1800s that allowed police to use deadly force whenever quote unquote necessary. Now they changed it, or whenever quote unquote reasonable. Now they've changed it to a necessary standard. However, they removed the definition of necessary because the police unions lobbied very hard to remove the definition. So the definition of what is considered necessary when a police officer can actually legally use deadly force is actually contentious right now. It has not been resolved in the courts. It has not been defined in legislation. So there's not a clear answer to your question, in part because of that lobbying to remove that definition from the law. That being said, there are police departments, local jurisdictions that have adopted stronger use of force policies and standards on deadly force than the law, than the minimum standard adopted in the state law. So, you know, you look at a place like Oakland, they very much have a standard that requires officers to exhaust all alternatives available to them prior to using deadly force. That is a standard that's in place in a handful of jurisdictions in California, not all of them. And part of the intent of that law was to update that, so every jurisdiction had to have that standard. It remains to be seen whether that will happen. It has to be resolved in the courts. Many of those use of force policies are being written in ways that actually may not actually comply with that law. So there's not a clear answer to your question. It's all being litigated. However, there are cities that have adopted that standard, and those cities like Oakland have had substantial reductions in deadly force.
Thank you. A couple more items from the chat. One, a response, one, another question. A response from the assistant chief from up to the question about officer discipline. He writes, Officer Dane Reister was fired in 2013 for shooting an individual with actual shotgun rounds instead of using less lethal rounds. So that's an example of termination for use of force there offered by the assistant chief. Now a question from Christopher Campbell. It's a question for Sam, and I'll read it verbatim. Sam, I appreciate your analytical efforts. Were you able to control for event level information, for example, type of stop and resistance, in your use of force analysis / presentation? If so, were population proportions also included? Again, that's from Chris. His microphone wasn't working, so if you have follow-ups, feel free to chat them. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's a great question. The answer is complicated. So we worked with the data that we could obtain from police agencies. In some cases, we were able to obtain incident level data that included columns for level of resistance, alleged weapon of the person, of the subject of force, and a variety of other factors. Where we could analyze that, we did. However, in some jurisdictions, what we had to go with was population demographics. We had arrest rates, and we have crime rates and a couple of other indicators, assaults on officers, and number of officers on the force per capita, and a few other variables. Those are the variables that we controlled for in the use of force analysis. And then we have done some deep dive analyses in particular jurisdictions like San Diego, for example, both the police department and the sheriff's department, with the expanded set of categories that we were able to obtain data on. So as you may know, police data is often lackluster or less than desirable. We often get less information than we would like. However, we do have the information on some of the key variables that, according to the research literature, we should be considering.
Very good. Thank you. Other questions or comments from anybody on the line? Andre, see your hand.
Yeah, this question goes out. Let's see, is he still on here to Assistant U.S. Attorney Jared Hager, if you're still there listening. We heard earlier from Sam about the DOJ's intervention in Oakland, how that led to policies that led to the force and harm reductions that many members of PCCEP would like to see here in Oakland. I was wondering if it's possible that you could get details on that from your Oakland colleagues about what exactly was enacted, and to see if we can assess that for the viability of presenting it as a recommendation to the mayor's office.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. One point of clarification there, the Oakland consent decree was not brought by the U.S. Department of Justice. It was brought by private litigants. However, we are in contact with those private litigants' counsel, and the expert in our case, who works for the Department of Justice, Chief Charlie Reynolds, had been the monitor in Oakland. So there is some cross-fertilization of those cases, and I can look into that. So if you give me a list, I can see what I can put together for you.
Perfect. Well, what kind of information would you need on that list?
Whatever information you're looking for. If you're looking for policies, if you're looking, I'm not exactly sure what you want.
Everything that Sam had mentioned before, policies, practices, the works, just something so we can evaluate it with an eye on solutions to improve, Portland's relationship with the police.
Very good. Yeah, put that together and I can see what I can grab for you.
Perfect. And Sam, would you be able to draft up everything you had said to us earlier? And
yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, all the data that we've produced is available publicly and it's online. You can go to useofforceproject.org and review how different police departments across the country, what types of restrictions are in place in their use of force policies. I believe it was mentioned earlier, the Police Scorecard Project, which currently reviews a range of different indicators for California's 100 largest cities, as well as every sheriff's department in California. That's at policescorecard.org. Our police union contract analysis is at checkthepolice.org. So I'd be happy to provide, all the data that we have is online, but if you have additional questions, I'd be happy to add value.
So useofforce.org was the one that has the restrictions and policies that Oakland enacted, is that correct?
Yeah, yes, okay. Useofforceproject.org.
Useofforceproject.org. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you both. We have another question through the chat. Tabiti Lewis writes in the following: can we get the Portland Police Bureau to participate in training? Or no, this is a private message. Sorry about that, Tabiti. I will respond to you in private.
No, it's not. I'm sorry. I
it's
made
not.
a mistake.
Okay.
It's not.
All right. Great. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to? Okay, I'll just go ahead and read what you wrote. So can we get the Portland Police Bureau to participate in training that forces them to see racial bias and use of force in policing as a nationwide issue? The problem, as per the data, is a mythical threat of Black and brown bodies. That is the elephant in the room that we have to admit exists and move forward to conquer it. I don't think we have anyone specifically from the training division on tonight, but if anyone from the Bureau wants to talk about the training that is in place now, or training that may be in place in the future on these issues in response to Biddy's question, please, by all means, the floor is yours.
Marvin and training, and I think that they do get oh cute baby, they do get training on implicit bias, but I think that's a good question to be about a conversation about sort of the national trend of the profession and the sort of deep-rooted issues in terms of how Black bodies are perceived as dangerous, as you just pointed out, is a deeper level that I know Marlon wants to go to, not to speak for him. So I think that either in the subcommittee, he attends the racial equity subcommittee meetings. And I don't know, Marcia, if that might be a good place to maybe have a follow-up with that question, which I think is excellent.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying the data is indisputable in that we have to change, at least here, we have this committee, the minds of, I could be walking down the street and seen as a threat. Maybe I'm holding a pencil, maybe I'm looking at someone who's perceived me to be a threat in a way that is going to incur violence, right? I'm gonna put myself there. And so forget all the degrees, forget all this other stuff. And so we have to, you know, Lakiana, you're right. It just has to be broached, you know, and it has to be, and the nationwide statistics speak to it, that confirms it, you know, and then I think Amy mentioned that she asked a question about the specifics of those individuals being arrested being armed, which brings a deeper level of scrutiny to these dynamics. So this is perfect for our committee to take on and really deter from a small contingency of the population a very large number of violent arrests that are taking place.
I would also add to that, thank you for that. I think it's really important that there is implicit bias training. This research that I've seen nationwide is that implicit bias training does not in fact function as an effectively to reduce those outcomes, because it's a larger cultural issue that is not necessarily going to be impacted by that implicit bias training. But I think one of the things Sam pointed to that worked in Oakland, and I've heard has worked in other places, is reducing the number of those low-level interactions. Because if you reduce those interactions, then you reduce the possibility for that implicit bias, which, let's face it, you know, no matter what we do, racism has a long history in this country and around the world, is probably going to exist, you know, in the next 10 years and through our lifetimes. So by reducing those interactions, we can hopefully reduce the number of arrests, but also the number of violent incidents. And I think looking at Oakland as a model, that's one thing that maybe Portland could look to.
Very good, thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Mr. Parman, yes.
Hi, Brian Parman from the Portland Police Bureau. I just wanted to offer up, you know, the Police Bureau has had, as part of our annual in-service now, we've had 2 years of training. We've had content related to implicit bias and content related to procedural justice. And we coordinate that training through, obviously, the training division and then our Office of Equity here within the Police Bureau. And so I'm sure the TAC or the training division could speak more about what is planned for the future. But the Police Bureau does have ongoing training related to the equity issues here in the city.
thank you for raising that. Amy. And I know we're over. We're going to have a hard stop at 8 o'clock, the top of the hour. So Amy, go ahead.
This is quick. Something that I'm curious about is the level of trauma-informed, what I call practicum. How much trauma-informed materials is being also used in training?
Crickets.
No one?
Mr. Parman?
I know that there is some of that content is contained within the CIT and the ECIT programs. I'm not sure whether or not, it's been several years since I've been assigned to training. I'm not sure if that is also part of our advanced academy. I'd have to check.
Great. We would, once you get the answer, again, one of those things we would love to know, and we can place it not only in the minutes, but follow up with Amy specifically.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
anyone I've missed? Sorry, go ahead.
We would like to recognize, along with what Brian Parman has said, in that the Police Bureau has taken a lot of steps, both in conjunction with the settlement agreement and outside it, to address some of these issues, including the training, the bias training, as well as some of the other reasons that I saw in researching Sam's work. So recommendations that have been made are de-escalation, continuum, force continuum, banning chokeholds, requiring warnings before shooting, restricted shooting of vehicles, requiring exhaustion of remedies before shooting, comprehensive reporting. A lot of these things are what I'm also seeing from the Police Bureau. And I think part of that has to do with the settlement agreement, part of that has to do with perhaps Chief Outlaw coming from the Oakland area as well. But in any case, certainly we can build upon that, but let's not lose sight that the Police Bureau has been putting into effect a lot of training and guidance and policies that hopefully will, in the future, instead of put us in the middle where Sam says we are as a city, higher up in that echelon of cities that are doing things well.
Andrew, it's Robert.
Yes, go ahead, Robert, and then Maci, I see you, so we'll have you next.
I was wondering from the committee, I just appreciate how the conversations played out tonight. You all know that as Vadim just said, there've been a lot of changes and a lot of work that's been done, but there's a sense by conversation tonight is that with the data, there's the disproportionality, and the question is, sort of a willingness to sort of acknowledge or address that. And I'm just wondering what, as you all as a body think about, what area could you make a recommendation in that you think could be the most impactful, in terms of like what does success look like? And if it's outcomes that you want changed or differently for the city or for the Police Bureau beyond, a lot of the extensive work that's been done up to this point. Do you feel, first of all, I guess this is the question, do you feel like you're adequately informed or knowledgeable about making a recommendation that you feel like could address in some substantial way the question or the concern that you're trying to get at? And then if you do, great. If you don't, do you feel like there's more information you need that would help inform you about being more specific around what it is exactly you'd like to see be different? And maybe the other part of it is how, for your recommendation, how would the Police Bureau or the city get there? What would they be doing differently beyond what they already are currently, what are other changes and improvements they've already made? So I just was, as I was listening to the conversation play out tonight, I was kind of circling around that general theme. So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Can I make a comment? I think that's one, you're right, Vadim. Certainly, there's been some progress. We know why. We don't want to discount that, but it is imperative that this committee's continues to push the envelope. I just posted some comments. What's your name, sir, who just spoke?
I'm Robert King.
Robert King.
Yeah.
If you look like me, you would understand why I'm asking that question, that if 5% of the population has a 30% chance of, of this sort of violent arrest taking place, then you would be probably a little less cavalier regarding, feeling comfortable in what has been achieved. This is a huge disparity that isn't just Portland, but it's nationwide. And so we don't want to get too caught up in patting ourselves on the back, nor ignore the hard work that many people have done to try to rectify the problem. I think the key is policies. I was living in St. Louis when there was a refusal to bring the officer to justice who murdered Michael Brown. And so again, what are the policies that make it where someone understands, number one, that your job is to redefining what policing means, and that you're doing more sociological, psychological interaction than this sort of physical and violent interaction that would create these kind of dynamics that have an outcome. And when we have intercultural disconnects, this is a large part of why you could be perceiving just me talking right now as, this guy is very aggressive, he's scaring me. And that's an intercultural dynamic that, based on your worldview, experience, etc., makes you perceive the fact that maybe I'm moving my hands, the fact that my speech has a certain rise or fall as a threat. And because you're in this position and maybe your interactions are limited, that moves forward, right? And then who's doing the training? Is it an internal dynamic where people are echoing that, yes, this is okay, hey, we're just checking off the box? These are the kind of, it's not about just checking the boxes. It's not about, and I get it, so that we can get the DOJ off everyone's back, but it's not about just checking the boxes. And so I'm hoping I'm answering your question, and I'll be quiet.
I want to add to Thaviti what he said in sort of response to you, Robert. What I'm interested in, I know that the Bureau has been doing lots of training, and when I look at the data on outcomes, and I don't see what seems to me to be continued disproportionate policing, egregious disproportionate policing, that suggests to me that the training is not the solution, or the training we have is not the solution. So my goal is completely outcomes based. I would want to see policing use of force incidents decline. I would like to see officer involved shootings decline. And I would like to see disproportionate policing against communities of color, against the houseless population, against people with mental illness, be proportionate to their presence in the population. And I think what a recommendation could be, and what would be helpful, is and this is why I asked the question, what is the plan of the PPB to achieve those goals? Because sometimes in conversations with different members of the Portland Police Bureau, I've heard a lack of acknowledgement that there is a problem. And this is where I think Lakiana was getting to. First, we have to have the acknowledgement that there is a problem, which I think Thaviti and others have spoken to quite eloquently. Then the question is, okay, what is the strategy when you have a game plan, a strategy in the Portland Police Bureau? It shouldn't just be about, we're going to do so many trainings, we're going to do so much community engagement. No, we're going to reduce use of force incidents by so much. We're going to reduce disproportionate policing by so much and have benchmarks. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think that if we had benchmarks, then we could see, are we making progress, are we not? And so I ask these questions sincerely does the police bureau, looking at this data, think that we're on the right path? Because when I look at that data, I say more needs to be done. Whatever's been done, great, but more needs to be done, and maybe direction needs to change to make those outcomes change.
I'm going to give the Bureau an opportunity to respond if they so choose, but if not, that's fine, and we'll turn the floor over to Marcia. Anyone from the Bureau want to chime in on any of that? Okay, Marcia, all yours. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, that's okay, thank you. I actually don't have much to add because I think Mr. Tabidi and Elliot really nailed kind of everything I was going to say. I do, appreciate the work that has been done. And actually, Portland Police Bureau has done a lot of work with the California Partnership for Safe Communities, which is based out of Oakland. So there are some offerings in collaboration with Oakland in that regard. But I think what we're talking about is really a cultural phenomenon that we're asking. It's not just about, we know that there's significant disproportionality, and we have to continue to seek from the community, what does a fundamental acknowledgement that racism exists in this community look like, so that we can do the work that needs to happen to close that gap. And so thank you, Elliot and Tabidi, for your responses. So I think I don't have anything to add to that. I would concur with all of that.
Thank you, Marcia. And thank you all for a robust discussion. It's not going to be the last. And to everyone's point, I think we're going to be as substantive as we can with this committee on providing concrete recommendations that are actionable. That's certainly our charge, and it's something we take seriously. So thank you all very much again for your time. Come on out to our virtual subcommittee meetings next month. I believe that the calendar is live on our website now, and we will meet again as a full board on the last Tuesday of June. Thank you all very much.